The sound cracked through the first-class cabin, sharp, humiliating. A white woman in pearls yanked back her hand, glaring at the 3 black children she'd just struck. "Control your kids," she hissed. "This isn't a daycare." The triplets, no older than 8, froze, one clutching the other's arm, eyes wide with fear. Passengers gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. A flight attendant hurried over, torn between protocol and panic. The woman crossed her arms, smug. "I paid for peace and quiet." Then the cabin doors opened, and a poised black woman in a navy suit stepped aboard, radiating authority. "Welcome to Respect Wind Stories, a place where powerful tales come alive, and every word carries meaning. I would love to know where you are joining from today. Share it in the comments below, and while you do, sit back, relax, and let your heart open to a story that will move your soul and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message, because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin. Her name was Elena Brooks, mother of 3, decorated pilot, and newly appointed CEO of Skynova Airlines. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered were her sons, terrified, silent, and shaking under the stares of strangers. The woman who hit them stood frozen, realizing too late who had just walked on board. Elena's gaze was calm, but her silence carried thunder. The cameras rolled, the flight attendants fumbled for words, and the entire cabin braced for impact. Because when the CEO's authority meets a mother's fury, justice doesn't need turbulence. It lands with precision. The woman's hand still hovered in the air, trembling faintly, as if even she couldn't believe what she'd done. The sound of the slap hung there, suspended in the recycled air of the cabin, a moment so sharp it felt carved into the hum of the engines. Elena didn't move at first. She just stood in the doorway, still holding her boarding pass, eyes locked on the stranger who had struck her children. Her expression was unreadable, not anger, not shock. Something colder, controlled, dangerous. Passengers murmured in hushed disbelief. A man in seat 2A whispered to his wife, "Did she really just hit those kids?" The flight attendant, a young man barely in his 20s, stammered, "Mom, please! I need everyone to stay seated." But the woman in pearls wasn't done. Her voice, brittle with entitlement, broke the silence. "They were screaming," I asked nicely twice. "You people think the rules don't apply just because..." "Because what?" Elena's voice cut through her like a blade wrapped in silk. The woman turned, eyes narrowing. "Because you clearly don't belong here." Gasps. Every head in the cabin swiveled. A businessman fumbled for his phone, pressing record. Elena stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking softly on the aisle floor. "Say that again," she said, her voice so calm it made the woman flinch. The flight attendant looked terrified. "Ma'am, please, we can handle this." Elena held up one hand. "You will, but not yet." The triplets sat frozen in their seats. 3 identical faces pale with confusion and fear. One of them, the smallest, Miles, whispered, "Mom." That word changed everything. The woman in pearls blinked. "Wait, you're..." Elena's calm smile didn't reach her eyes. "Their mother, yes." The cabin went silent again. Even the engines seemed to fade into the background hum of something heavier. Shame, tension, fear. The woman straightened, trying to recover. "Well, then maybe you should teach them how to behave in public." Elena's head tilted slightly. "And maybe," she said softly, "you should learn how to behave around children." A ripple of murmurs passed through the aisle. The woman flushed, her voice rising. "I don't have to be lectured by some..." Elena stepped closer. "By some what?" "Finish that sentence carefully," the woman faltered, realizing too late that the balance of power had already shifted. "I'm calling security," she snapped, turning toward the flight attendant for backup. "She's threatening me!" The attendant hesitated, glancing between them, then froze as he saw Elena's ID lanyard slip from her blazer pocket. The silver badge gleamed under the cabin lights. Skynova Executive Access, CEO. He blinked. "Oh my God." The woman's bravado wavered. That can't be real." Elena's tone didn't change. "It's very real, and unfortunately for you, so is what you just did." She turned to the attendant. "Please secure the passenger manifest and any video footage from the cabin. Nobody deletes a thing." The young attendant nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am," the woman sputtered. You can't tell them what to do." Elena finally smiled, a slow, poised curve of confidence. "Actually, I can. You're on my airline." The cabin erupted into whispers. Someone whispered, "Oh, she's done," while another quietly filmed from behind a newspaper. Elena crouched slightly to meet her son's eyes. "Are you hurt?" They shook their heads, still trembling. "Good," she whispered, brushing a tear from one of their cheeks. "You did nothing wrong." When she stood again, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Flight attendant," she said evenly, "escort this passenger off my aircraft. We'll hold departure until the authorities arrive." The woman's jaw dropped. "You can't just watch me." For the first time, real fear flickered across the woman's face. As the flight attendant called security over the intercom, Elena turned away, calm, controlled. But inside, a storm brewed, because this wasn't over. Not yet. This wasn't just about her children anymore. It was about every parent who'd ever had to swallow their dignity to keep the peace. And for the first time in years, Elena decided she wouldn't. The intercom crackled above them. "Security requested to gate 12A. Immediate assistance." A tremor rippled through the cabin. Passengers leaned into aisles, phones half raised, unsure whether to record history or hide from it. Elena remained motionless beside her sons, the calm center of the storm. Her breathing was steady, but her mind ticked through checklists, policy clauses, disciplinary protocols, PR contingencies. She could dismantle an airline with one email if she wanted to. But today, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about visibility. The woman in pearls, Mrs. Halstead, the manifest would later reveal, folded her arms tightly. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't hit them. I just made contact with a child without consent," Eleanor interrupted, voice level. "In public, on camera, aboard private corporate property. That's assault." Gasps fluttered again. The businessman in 2A lowered his phone slightly, whispering, "She knows exactly what she's doing." Mrs. Halstead scoffed. They were being disruptive. Any responsible adult would have done the same. Eleanor took one step closer, her heels whispering against the carpet. No, any responsible adult would have asked a flight attendant for help. The young attendant swallowed hard. "Ma'am, the captain says we'll hold boarding until this is sorted." Elena nodded once. "Good." Mrs. Halstead glanced around for allies. "Are you people seriously siding with her?" No one answered. A middle-aged man murmured, "Lady, you slapped a kid." Colour drained from her face. "He was kicking my seat," one of the triplets whimpered softly. "We were playing rock, paper, scissors." Eleanor's jaw tightened. That was enough. She pulled her phone from her blazer, opened the cabin security app she herself had helped design, and tapped Incident Record. The lens captured Mrs. Halstead's frozen expression. "I suggest you stop speaking until security arrives," Eleanor said quietly. "Everything from this moment forward is documented." The woman's lips twitched. "You're threatening me," Elena met her gaze. "No, I'm preserving evidence." The attendant near the galley whispered into his radio. "Security's 5 minutes out." Mrs. Halstead began pacing, her confidence cracking. "I'm calling my husband. He's an attorney," Elena replied. "Then he'll know to advise you not to speak further." A laugh escaped from somewhere in the cabin. The tension briefly broke, then returned twice as heavy. The eldest triplet, Mason, tugged Eleanor's sleeve. "Mummy, are we in trouble?" She crouched again, voice gentle now. "Not even a little bit. You were brave. That's all." A tear slipped down his cheek. She wiped it away with her thumb, smiling faintly. "You did exactly what you should have. Nothing." When she stood again, her eyes were steel. "Mom," the attendant whispered. "Gate security's almost here." "Thank you," Eleanor said. Then, deliberately, she turned to face the watching passengers. "My children are autistic," she said evenly. "Noise and movement are part of how they calm themselves. They weren't disturbing anyone until this woman decided their difference offended her." Every word landed like a gavel. Even those who hadn't witnessed the slap now understood. Mrs. Halstead sputtered, "How was I supposed to know that?" "You didn't have to know," Elena answered. "You only had to be kind." Silence. Then footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. Heavy, approaching. 2 uniformed security officers appeared in the doorway, scanning the cabin. "Who made the call?" one asked. Elena raised her hand slightly. "I did. I'm Elena Brooks, CEO of Sky Nova Airlines." The taller officer blinked. "Ma'am, you're—" "Yes," she said. "And this passenger assaulted my children." Gasps turned into a low murmur. Phones lifted again. Mrs. Halstead's breathing quickened. "This is insane," she snapped. "You can't treat me like a criminal." Elena's reply was almost a whisper, but it carried through the cabin. Then perhaps you shouldn't behave like one. The officers exchanged glances and stepped forward. As they reached her row, Mrs. Halstead's mask of control shattered. "Do you know who I am?" she cried. Elena didn't blink. "No, but after today, everyone will." The taller officer gestured calmly. "Ma'am, we'll step outside and talk." Mrs. Halstead's protest dissolved into incoherent sputtering as she was guided toward the aisle. Passengers whispered, "She's finished. That woman's done for. Karma." Right on time. Elena exhaled slowly, smoothing the edge of her blazer, eyes following her son's, safe, quiet, watching her with awe. But beneath the serenity, something still burned. The cameras might catch justice, but they wouldn't capture what it cost. And as the officers led the woman away, Elena knew part C of this story was still waiting to land. Security escorted Mrs. Halstead down the aisle, her perfume trailing behind like the last trace of arrogance. Passengers leaned away as she passed, a silent verdict from an impromptu jury of witnesses. The moment she stepped through the aircraft door, a wave of murmurs followed her exit, a collective exhale the entire cabin seemed to share. But Elena didn't sit down. She stood in the aisle, gaze sweeping the passengers who were still whispering, filming, pretending not to look. Her son sat quietly, their small hands gripping each other's for comfort. The flight attendants hovered near the galley, exchanging uncertain glances, unsure whether to restart the boarding process or await further orders. "Captain wants to know if we're cleared to proceed." "Ma'am?" the young attendant said softly. "Not yet," Elena replied, her tone measured. "I need a full incident report before we move." The attendant nodded and scurried off, relieved to have direction. One of the passengers, an older man in a business suit, raised his hand tentatively. "Miss Brooks, is it true you're the CEO?" Elena turned to him. "Yes," he hesitated. "Then, may I just say what you did? Standing up like that. We need more of that in this world." A few people nodded in agreement. Someone clapped quietly. Then another joined. Within seconds, polite applause rippled through the cabin. Hesitant, sincere, almost reverent. Elena didn't smile. "Thank you," she said. "But this isn't applause worthy. It's basic humanity." That line struck like lightning. The clapping stopped. The cabin fell into reflective silence. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft door, raised voices echoed from the gate. The officers were struggling to contain Mrs. Halstead's tirade. Through the open crack of the doorway, passengers could hear snippets. "You'll regret this, and I'll ruin her. And I know people." Eleanor sighed, turning toward the sound. Her calm mask didn't crack, but her hands tightened slightly around the back of a seat. She had dealt with corporate wars, mergers, public relations nightmares. But nothing tested her like the assault of her children. The youngest, Miles, tugged at her sleeve again. "Mommy, are we still going on the trip?" Elena crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, we are. No one can stop us from flying." He smiled faintly, reassured, though his eyes still shimmered with confusion. The intercom buzzed again. "Gate security requests confirmation from Ms. Brooks. Incident under review. Do you want the flight delayed or cancelled?" Every passenger looked toward her. She stood slowly, exhaling through her nose. "Delay it for 30 minutes. I'll handle this personally." A murmur ran through the cabin, the realization that they were witnessing something larger than a passenger dispute. Elena handed her blazer to the attendant, smoothing the sleeves of her crisp white shirt. Then she walked calmly toward the exit. The crowd parted instinctively, every pair of eyes following her as she stepped through the doorway. In the jet bridge, chaos. Mrs. Halstead was red-faced, shouting into her phone. Two security officers stood by helplessly as she ranted about lawsuits and discrimination. Elena's voice sliced through the noise. "Mrs. Halstead." The woman froze mid-sentence. Elena stopped a few feet away, her posture perfect, her tone precise. "For the record, you've now verbally threatened my staff and obstructed an active safety review. Both are federal offenses." Mrs. Halstead blinked. You can't talk to me like that." "I can, and I will," Elena said, "because I'm not just a CEO right now. I'm a mother protecting her children. And every second you keep shouting, you're proving why you don't belong anywhere near another passenger." The woman's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Elena continued, voice steady as steel. "You'll be placed on our no-fly list pending investigation. and I'll personally ensure that footage of your behavior is shared with aviation authorities. You'll answer for this, publicly. Gasps from nearby passengers echoed through the jet bridge. Mrs. Halstead's bravado crumbled. Please, it was a misunderstanding. Elena's expression softened, but only slightly. Then next time, misunderstand with kindness. She turned and re-entered the cabin, leaving the woman speechless behind her. Inside, every passenger stared in quiet awe. The attendant whispered, "We're clear to close the doors, ma'am." Elena nodded. "Then let's fly." As she took her seat beside her boys, one of them whispered, "Mom, did we win?" Elena looked out the window as the plane began to taxi, the clouds ahead painted gold by the morning sun. "No," she said softly. "We just started something bigger." By the time the plane landed in New York, the video had already gone viral. Someone from row 12 had uploaded the clip to social media mid-flight, a shaky recording, but the sound was clear. The slap, the silence, the mother's calm walk down the aisle. By touchdown, the clip had 5 million views. By the time the passengers disembarked, news anchors were already calling it the slap heard across the cabin. Elena didn't check her phone. She carried her sons through the gate, heads held high, ignoring the flashes of cell phones and reporters crowding the terminal. Her assistant, waiting by the security checkpoint, looked panicked. "Mom, you're trending worldwide," he said breathlessly. "The footage is everywhere. Every outlet wants a statement." Elena stopped, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Not yet," she said. "We wait. But Mom," she cut him off with a look, calm, commanding. "If I speak now, it'll sound defensive. We let the truth breathe first. Then we land the message." Her sons looked up at her, puzzled but trusting. She knelt beside them, smoothing their curls. "Boys, no matter what you hear, remember, you did nothing wrong. You were brave." The eldest, Micah, whispered, "Will the lady go to jail?" Elena hesitated. "That's for the law to decide. But she'll learn." They exited through a private gate, escorted by security. Behind them, whispers followed like an invisible current. "That's her. That's the CEO. Those are the kids." Across the city, in a sleek penthouse apartment, Madeline Halstead, the woman who had slapped the triplets, was pacing in panic. The incident report had been sent to her employer, the Halstead Foundation, a powerful PR firm. Calls from clients were flooding in. "What do you mean it's viral?" she shouted at her husband over the phone. "It was just a misunderstanding. That woman, she provoked me." Her husband's voice crackled through the line. "You slapped children, Maddie." "On video! It wasn't like that." She screamed, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. The television behind her played the clip again, slowed down, frame by frame, her hand rising, the gasp from passengers, the child's flinch, the cold, controlled expression of the mother standing in the aisle. Then came the reveal. Reporters digging into the passenger manifest. The name Eleanor Brooks, CEO of Skynova Airlines. The irony struck the internet like lightning. The woman Madeline assaulted wasn't just a passenger. She owned the airline. By nightfall, hashtags flooded social media. Skynova Justice, Mother in Command, no excuse for abuse. Influencers reposted the footage with captions like, "Grace Under Fire looks like this." Airlines around the world issued statements condemning passenger violence. In a single day, Elena had become a symbol, not of power, but of composure under cruelty. Meanwhile, at Skynova headquarters, the board gathered in emergency session. Elena entered the room quietly, her sons at home with their nanny. The directors stood when she arrived, a gesture of respect, but also apprehension. The chairman spoke first. "Eleanor, we've all seen the footage. The brand is under scrutiny. We're expecting a media storm." Eleanor placed her hands on the table. "Then we don't hide from it," she said. "We lead it." A murmur of uncertainty rippled through the room. She continued, her voice unwavering. "We release an official statement tomorrow, no spin. Just the truth. What happened, why it matters, and how we'll use this moment to make air travel safer for everyone." The PR director frowned. "You want to acknowledge the slap incident publicly? That could inflame it further." Eleanor met his gaze. "It's already inflamed. I'd rather control the fire than watch it burn the company." Silence. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Elena leaned back, calm but sharp-eyed. "And make sure this is part of the release. The woman responsible will be banned from all Skynova flights indefinitely. We protect our passengers regardless of race, ability, or background." The PR team exchanged glances. They had never seen a CEO handle crisis with such precision. Not rage, not fear, but purpose. As the meeting adjourned, one young intern whispered to another, "She's not just cleaning up a scandal, she's rewriting the rules." And outside, the world was listening. Morning sunlight spilled through the Skynova headquarters like a quiet promise. The marble floors reflected a dozen camera lights as reporters clustered outside, microphones raised, demanding a statement. News vans lined the street. The world wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Inside, Eleanor walked through the glass corridor toward the press hall, posture tall, suit immaculate. Her assistant trailed behind, tablet in hand, whispering updates. CNN, BBC, and Reuters are all live. Social media sentiments at 90% in your favor. Hashtag Elena Brooks hit 10 million overnight. Elena barely reacted. "That's not the goal," she said. "We're not here for praise. We're here for accountability." The assistant nodded, eyes wide with admiration. In the adjacent boardroom, the directors watched from a monitor. The PR head muttered, "She's walking into a firestorm." Alone, the chairman smirked faintly. She is the firestorm. When Elena stepped onto the stage, the flashbulbs went wild. She waited for silence, not by raising her hand, but simply by standing still. The room quieted on instinct. "Good morning," she began, her voice firm but calm. "Yesterday, a deeply disturbing event occurred aboard one of our flights. An act of aggression was committed against 3 of our youngest passengers. My sons." A low murmur swept through the crowd. Cameras clicked rapidly. Elena continued, "I've watched the footage. I've spoken with my team. I've reviewed the incident from every angle, and I want to be clear. What happened on that plane was not an isolated act of cruelty. It was a reflection of something much larger, the quiet biases that too often go unchallenged." Reporters scribbled furiously. She paused, scanning the room. "My sons are autistic. They are brilliant, kind, and learning the world in their own beautiful way. Yesterday, someone decided their difference was a disruption. She was wrong. Her tone hardened, not loud but absolute. There is no seat, no class, no privilege that excuses violence. Not in my airline, not in my world." The room fell utterly silent. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate before clicking again. Then she shifted gears, her calm turning surgical. "Effective immediately, Skynova will implement a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and assault on all flights. Every crew member will receive expanded bias and neurodiversity training. Every incident will be reviewed independently." She let that sink in. "We are not reacting. We are evolving." A reporter from NBC raised her hand. "Ms. Brooks, has the passenger who assaulted your children been identified publicly?" Elena met her gaze. "Not by me, and not by this company." That answer stunned them. Another journalist leaned forward. "So you're not pressing charges?" Eleanor's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, but something sharper. "I don't need to chase justice. It's already catching up to her." Gasps rippled across the room. Outside, on the giant digital screens lining Times Square, clips of Elena's speech played live. Her poise, her words, her strength. Commentators began calling her the Iron Dove, the CEO who wielded empathy like armor. Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Madeleine Halstead was unraveling. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News channels replaying her name, her face, her voice shouting in the jet bridge. Clients were dropping her firm faster than she could respond. The final blow came that afternoon. Skynova's official statement. It didn't name her, but the message was unmistakable. We do not tolerate prejudice or violence. Every passenger deserves dignity in flight. Underneath, the company's new initiative launched. Project Skykind, a global awareness campaign advocating for inclusivity in air travel. It featured families with special needs children, passengers from diverse backgrounds, and flight crews championing kindness at 30,000 feet. The campaign trended instantly. Influencers, celebrities, even rival CEOs joined in, quoting Elena's line, "There is no seat, no class, no privilege that excuses violence." Within 24 hours, Madeleine's firm suspended her indefinitely. Within 48, the foundation issued a public apology, not to her, but to Elena and her children. And in every news studio across the country, anchors repeated the same sentiment. The CEO didn't just win a PR battle, she redefined leadership. That night, Elena sat by her son's bedside, tucking them in. The boys were exhausted but smiling. "Mommy," Miles murmured sleepily. "The lady said sorry on TV." Eleanor brushed his curls back gently. "Good. Maybe she learned something." "Did we do something special?" Elena smiled softly. "You reminded the world what respect looks like." As their breathing slowed into sleep, she looked out the window, the city lights twinkling like runways below. Somewhere in that glow, the world was changing, one act of calm defiance at a time. 2 days later, the Sky Nova headquarters lobby buzzed with subdued tension. Reporters still crowded outside, and employees whispered as Elena passed, admiration mixing with awe. The scandal that could have wrecked the company had turned into a symbol of strength. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She'd received a message that morning from the Federal Aviation Council. The footage of the incident had prompted a review, not of her airline, but of how airlines across the nation handle discrimination complaints. The council wanted her to lead a public initiative on passenger ethics. Her assistant entered, holding a sleek folder. "The council's press event is in 2 hours. They'd like you to name the ambassador for Project Skykind." Elena took the folder, scanning its contents. Statistics on hate incidents in travel, public trust reports, photos of families who had written letters after seeing the video. She closed it quietly. "We'll make the announcement there," she said. Her assistant hesitated. "There's one more thing." He handed her a printed email from Madeline Halstead. The subject line read, "Personal apology." Elena read it silently. The email was long, desperate, and clumsy. An attempt to explain, to soften, to beg. Madeline claimed stress, misunderstanding, emotional exhaustion. But somewhere near the end, one line stood out. "I've lost everything. Please, Miss Brooks, if you could make a public statement saying you forgive me, it might help me rebuild what's left." Eleanor folded the paper once, twice, then set it aside. "She'll get her answer," she said simply. 2 hours later, under a vast skylight that spilled white light across the stage, Elena took her place at the podium. The hall was filled with journalists, executives, and families of passengers with special needs. Cameras broadcast live across every major network. She began, steady as ever. "A few days ago, an act of cruelty turned into a moment of clarity. We've all seen the footage. But what matters now isn't what happened. It's what happens next." She gestured toward a large screen behind her. "I'm proud to announce that Project Skykind is now a global partnership, endorsed by the FAA, supported by over 40 airlines, and led by a committee dedicated to education and accountability in air travel." Applause filled the room. When it quieted, she added, "And I'd like to introduce the campaign's first ambassador, someone who represents courage under judgment, strength under misunderstanding." The lights dimmed. A video began to play, images of the triplets laughing, colouring, playing with model planes. Then, over soft piano, Elena's voice narrated, "These are my sons. The world may have seen them as passengers that day, but I see pioneers, the reason kindness must fly higher than hate." When the video ended, the audience was standing. The applause rolled like thunder. Backstage, an aide handed her phone, vibrating non-stop. Calls, messages, emails. Among them, one notification stood out, Madeline Halstead, trending again. Elena tapped the headline. The article read, "Disgraced PR executive fired after racist assault video. Victim declines to endorse forgiveness statement." She read the quote attributed to herself, the statement she'd sent minutes before the event began. Forgiveness isn't a press release, it's a process. Some lessons need to be learned in silence. It went viral instantly. That night, the clip of Elena's speech became the top post on nearly every platform. The video of her triplets, smiling beneath the Skykind logo, flooded timelines worldwide. For once, the internet wasn't divided. It was inspired. Meanwhile, Madeline sat alone in her dim apartment. Her phone buzzed with another headline notification. The Sky Nova stock soaring, the campaign hailed as a corporate miracle. She turned off the screen, her reflection staring back from the darkened glass, hollow, small, forgotten. Across town, Eleanor tucked her boys into bed, the glow of the campaign video playing softly on the TV. "Mommy," Micah murmured. "Everyone's being nice on the internet now." Eleanor chuckled. "For today, maybe, but that's how change starts." Miles smiled. "Did you forgive the lady?" Elena looked at him thoughtfully. "Not yet," she said, "but I hope one day she forgives herself." Outside, a plane roared across the night sky, lights cutting through the dark. Elena watched it, whispering softly, not to the world, but to herself. Let kindness keep flying. And for the first time in days, she smiled. Not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a mother who had turned pain into purpose. The following week, the world seemed quieter, not in sound, but in tone. News anchors had stopped debating whether Elena Brooks was too calm or too cold. They finally understood that composure was her power. What had begun as outrage had evolved into reflection. Commentators now discussed neurodiversity, bias in air travel, and corporate ethics. Not gossip, but growth. Inside Skynova headquarters, Elena stood by her office window overlooking the city skyline. The Project Skykind banners now hung across terminals in 50 airports. Her team had tripled in size, and yet, as she sipped her coffee, she knew it wasn't about victory. It was about responsibility. Her phone buzzed. It was her communications director. "Elena, CNN wants to do a follow-up. They're calling you the CEO who changed the skies." Elena smiled faintly. "They can call me whatever they want," she said, setting down her cup. "Just make sure the focus stays on the mission, not me." Downstairs, the Skynova lobby bustled with new recruits for the Skykind initiative, young professionals from across the country. Posters of diverse passengers filled the walls: elderly travelers, disabled veterans, autistic children, interracial families. Beneath each image, the same tagline glowed softly: "Every seat deserves respect." Meanwhile, Madeline Halstead's world continued to collapse. Her PR license was under review. Sponsors had severed ties. Online petitions demanded her permanent blacklisting from all domestic airlines. She'd issued multiple apologies, tearful videos, public letters, but none carried the weight of sincerity. Her words felt rehearsed, hollow. And then came the final blow. Skynova's legal department filed a civil suit, not for money, but for precedent. The goal was clear: to establish the first airline-backed zero-tolerance legal framework for passenger assault against vulnerable individuals. When the news broke, social media exploded. Even critics of corporate activism praised the decision. Headlines read, "CEO uses power to protect, not punish." Eleanor Brooks pushes landmark policy to redefine passenger rights. The world was learning that true justice wasn't vengeance, it was structure. At home, life felt gentler. The triplets were adjusting, their laughter returning. They built small airplane models together, each one painted with different colors: red, blue, green, their Skykind fleet, as they called it. One evening, as Elena helped them glue the last wing into place, her eldest Micah asked softly, "Mom, why didn't you yell at the lady?" Elena paused. "Because yelling teaches fear," she said. "But silence, when used right, teaches respect." He nodded, thoughtful beyond his years. "You were really quiet," he said. Elena smiled. "Sometimes quiet is the loudest sound in the room." That night, after they slept, she walked through the house, past the framed photographs of her late husband, her first flight wings, the Skynova charter certificate. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, without the weight of the world pressing back. But peace, she knew, didn't come without ripples. The next morning, an unexpected email arrived from the Department of Transportation. They wanted to collaborate on integrating Skykind into federal airline policy. Eleanor read it twice, eyes narrowing in disbelief. What began as a moment of pain had ignited a national reform movement. Her assistant peeked through the door. "Ma'am, should I schedule a response?" "Yes," she said slowly. "Tell them the skies are open," the assistant smiled. "Beautiful line, ma'am." Elena turned toward the window again, sunlight catching the edge of her blazer. Not a line, she said quietly. A truth. Outside, a Skynova jet soared into the bright morning, its tail emblazoned with the new Skykind insignia. 3 interlocking circles, symbolizing unity, awareness, and compassion. As Elena watched it disappear into the clouds, she whispered to herself, justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it ascends. And somewhere above those clouds, she imagined her son's laughter echoing, unbroken, unafraid, and finally free. 2 weeks later, the case hit federal court. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, reporters battling for position, lenses glinting under the morning sun. The story had grown far beyond a single act of violence. It had become a mirror, forcing society to confront its reflection. Elena arrived with quiet dignity, escorted not by bodyguards but by her legal counsel and a small group of Skykind advocates, parents of special needs children, flight attendants, and even a few passengers from that fateful flight. The triplets stayed home, shielded from the spectacle. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like a pressurized cabin. When the bailiff called, "All rise," every head turned as the judge entered, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Today," the judge began, "we hear the case of Brooks versus Halstead. The charge, aggravated assault, civil discrimination, and interference with airline safety." Madeline sat at the defense table, pale and trembling. Her once perfect posture was gone, her shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Her attorney whispered hurriedly, but her eyes stayed locked on the woman across the room, Elena, serene, unreadable. The prosecution began by playing the infamous footage again. The sound of that slap echoed through the courtroom. Even now, days later, it made the air feel heavier. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The sight of 3 innocent children shrinking back and the unshaken calm of their mother spoke louder than any testimony. Then came the witnesses. A flight attendant testified first, voice shaking slightly. Mrs. Halstead kept yelling even after the children started crying. When Ms. Brooks stood up, she didn't yell. She just looked at her. It was the quietest, scariest moment I've ever seen. Another passenger confirmed it. You could feel it. That shift in power. The woman who hit those kids realized she'd just hit the wrong person. Madeline's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, this has turned into a media circus. My client has been punished enough." The judge's gaze hardened. "Punishment is not the same as accountability. Continue." When it was Elena's turn to take the stand, the room stilled completely. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "This isn't about me. It's about the children she represents. Every kid who's been told they're too loud, too different, too inconvenient. My sons didn't need to be strong that day. The world needed to be better." Even Madeline's attorney lowered his eyes. The cross-examination was brief. The defense tried to paint the slap as an emotional lapse, but every attempt unraveled under Eleanor's composure. She didn't counterattack. She didn't sneer. She just told the truth, precise, unshaken, undeniable. When the judge finally adjourned for verdict, the courtroom seemed to exhale as one. After an hour of deliberation, the decision returned, guilty on all counts. Madeline's sentence was modest: community service, mandated therapy, and a lifetime ban from domestic airlines. But her reputation, career, and credibility were beyond repair. As the judge read the ruling, tears streaked down Madeline's cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered toward Elena. "I really am." Elena didn't look away, but her expression stayed neutral. "Then prove it," she said softly. "Help someone you used to ignore." Reporters caught that line instantly. By evening it was everywhere. Help someone you used to ignore. It became a slogan, adopted by non-profits, quoted in speeches, printed on banners across Skykind hubs worldwide. Outside the courthouse, microphones swarmed as Elena exited. "Ms. Brooks, how do you feel about the verdict?" She paused briefly on the courthouse steps, her hair brushing in the wind, the afternoon sunlight catching her eyes. "I feel hopeful," she said, "not because justice was served, but because empathy finally was." That clip aired globally. For the first time in days, there was no outrage online, only gratitude. Parents shared messages thanking her for representing them. Airlines pledged new inclusivity training. The Skykind Foundation received thousands of donations overnight. Later that night, Elena stood on her balcony overlooking the city, calm, reflective. Her assistant joined her quietly, holding a printed headline, From SLAP to standard. Elena Brooks changes air travel forever. He smiled. You did it. Eleanor shook her head. No, we did. Every parent, every child who's ever been told to stay quiet. They spoke through me. Far below, city lights shimmered like constellations. The storm had passed. Justice had landed. But for Elena Brooks, the flight toward change had just begun. Weeks rolled into months, and the story's noise faded from headlines into history. Yet its ripples moved quietly through every terminal and boardroom in the industry. At JFK, new banners fluttered above check-in counters. Every passenger matters. Flight crews attended empathy workshops designed by SkyKind. Pilots sat in seminars led by autism advocates. Even rival airlines requested Elena's team to train their staff. What began with outrage was reshaping the skies. Elena watched the progress unfold from her corner office overlooking the runway. The view stretched wide, planes gliding into clouds like silver birds finding peace again. She had always loved this perspective. Altitude without arrogance. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but exhaustion lived behind her eyes. Victory, she realized, could be heavier than battle. Her phone buzzed. A message from her board chair. FAA to honor SkyKind with Humanity in Aviation Award next week. You'll accept it. She smiled faintly. Titles and trophies had never mattered much. Yet this one meant something deeper. Not for her, but for the kids whose courage had forced the world to pause. That evening, she returned home to find the triplets building a cardboard airplane in the living room. Tape, markers, and imagination covered the floor. Malik wore a paper captain's hat. Micah and Miles argued about who got to steer. Mom, Malik shouted. Guess what? Our teacher showed the news story in class today. Everyone clapped. Elena knelt beside them, touched the cardboard wing, and whispered, That's your plane, huh? Micah nodded. It's called Kind One. It takes everyone who's different wherever they want to go. For the first time in months, she laughed. A full, unguarded laugh. Then I guess I should reserve a seat. Later, after the boys drifted to sleep, Eleanor wandered out to the porch. The city hummed softly under a violet sky. She thought about Madeline Halstead, the woman whose cruelty had accidentally ignited a movement. Reports said she had completed her first week of community service at a children's hospital, reading to patients. Elena wondered if redemption could ever truly erase harm, or if it simply taught humility one story at a time. Her phone chimed again, a notification from SkyKind's internal network. A photo had gone viral among staff. A young flight attendant kneeling beside an autistic child on a plane, helping him with noise-cancelling headphones. The caption read, Because kindness is policy now. Comments flooded beneath it. Pilots, engineers, even passengers sharing their own moments of compassion. Elena exhaled slowly. That was the real verdict. The following week, at the FAA ceremony, the hall shimmered with glass and chrome. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto the stage, dressed in charcoal grey, her posture steady. The announcer's voice echoed, For redefining empathy in aviation, we honor Elena Brooks, CEO of SkyKind Airlines. Applause filled the room like wind through wings. When it was her turn to speak, she looked over the audience. Executives, attendants, journalists, families, and then down to the first row, where her sons sat swinging their legs, smiling proudly. She began quietly. People think strength is loud, but I've learned it can also be silent, steady as a mother, calming a storm mid-flight. She paused, eyes glistening. A single act of cruelty can echo across the world, but so can an act of grace. Our job isn't to control skies, it's to make them safe for everyone beneath them. Thunderous applause followed. Cameras caught every tear, every smile. That night, back home, Elena tucked the boys in. Miles mumbled sleepily, Mom, are we safe now? She brushed his hair. We are, sweetheart, and so is everyone who flies after us. Outside, an aircraft roared overhead, lights blinking like slow heartbeats. She looked up through the window, whispering to herself, Fly kind. The phrase felt less like a motto and more like a promise. The scandal that began with a slap had ended with transformation. Not revenge, but reform. The world had watched a mother turn pain into policy, arrogance into awareness. And as dawn crept over the horizon, the first SkyKind flight of the day lifted gracefully into the gold-washed sky. Proof that from turbulence, a smoother path can always rise. The house was finally quiet, For the first time in months, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, touching the photographs pinned to the fridge. The triplets on their first day of school, Elena smiling beside a Skykind jet, a candid shot of all four laughing over burnt pancakes. It was ordinary, but it meant everything. Elena stood by the counter, stirring coffee she barely tasted. Her phone buzzed. Another message from a parent she didn't know. "My daughter's autistic. We flew Skykind last week. The crew was kind, patient. Thank you for changing what flying feels like," she smiled softly. There were hundreds of messages like that now. Everyone reminded her that what began as chaos had turned into connection. Outside, birds scattered across the sky like tiny planes finding their roots. The city hummed below, unaware of the small revolution still unfolding because of one terrible moment that became something extraordinary. Her assistant, Lila, arrived a little after 9 with folders and her usual crisp energy. "Morning, boss. We finalized the new partnership with Families First. Oh, and..." She handed Elena a thick envelope. Letters from schools around the country. Kids drew pictures of planes with hearts on them. Elena opened one at random. A crayon drawing showed 3 little boys holding hands with a woman in a suit. Above it, a shaky caption read, "Kindness can fly." Her throat tightened. She pressed the picture to her chest. "You know," she murmured, "if the world ever forgets what happened, I think these drawings will remember for it." Lila smiled. "It's strange, isn't it? How pain can build something better." "It's not strange," Elena said quietly. "It's the only reason we survive it." Later that afternoon, she took the triplets to the park. The air was cool and clean, the kind of day that felt like forgiveness. Parents glanced their way, some with recognition, others simply curious, but no one stared, no one whispered. The boys ran freely across the grass, chasing each other with laughter that carried further than any headline ever had. A little girl nearby covered her ears when an ice cream truck honked too loud. Micah paused, then gently handed her his spare pair of ear defenders. "These help," he said. The girl smiled. Her mother mouthed thank you, and Elena felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. The world wasn't perfect, but it was learning. That evening, they stopped for dinner at their favorite diner, the same one they'd avoided for months after the incident. The waitress recognized them instantly. "Well, if it isn't my favorite flyers," she said cheerfully, setting down menus. "We saved your corner booth. On the house tonight." Elena tried to protest, but the woman waved her off. "You gave my son courage to fly again. He has sensory issues, and after what you did," he said, "if those boys can fly, so can I. You don't owe me a thing." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Gratitude and humility tangled in her throat. She simply nodded. "Thank you for seeing us." The meal was simple: fries, milkshakes, laughter, but it felt sacred, like reclaiming a piece of normal life that had been taken and returned brighter. As they drove home, the boys dozed off in the back seat, their heads leaning against each other. Streetlights painted soft amber across their faces. Elena glanced at them through the rearview mirror and whispered, "You changed the world without meaning to." In her heart, she knew it was true. They'd been the storm's center, innocent, unaware, and yet their calm had guided an entire movement toward empathy. When she parked the car, she didn't move right away. She just sat there, watching the quiet neighborhood, the stillness after everything. Not long ago, that silence would have felt like loneliness. Now it felt like peace. She finally whispered the words she'd never said aloud since that day. "We're safe now." The words didn't echo. They settled. And for the first time since the slap that changed everything, Eleanor Brooks allowed herself to believe it. 3 months later, Elena stood backstage at the Global Humanity Forum in Geneva, waiting for her cue. The audience beyond the curtain was massive. Leaders, advocates, and journalists from every continent. Yet for all the spotlights and anticipation, she felt no nerves, just a calm pulse in her chest, steady as an engine before takeoff. Behind her, a production assistant whispered, "You're up in 30 seconds. Ms. Brooks," she nodded and looked down at her notes. Not pages of policy or strategy, but 3 words scribbled in pen. See, listen, lift. That was all she needed. When she stepped on stage, the applause rose like a tide. Cameras zoomed in, flashes strobed. And for a brief moment, she remembered another crowd, another storm. Reporters shouting questions outside a courthouse. But this time, the light didn't burn. It illuminated. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was low, sure. "Months ago, I stood in a courtroom because of a slap heard around the world. But today, I stand here to talk about something louder. The sound of empathy." The hall grew still. She spoke not like a CEO, but like a mother, weaving her words through memory and meaning. "I learned that day that power isn't the uniform you wear or the money you make. It's how you treat the person you think can't fight back." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. She continued, telling the story, not with bitterness, but with clarity, about her boys, about how fear turned into strength, about the strangers who chose to stand beside her instead of turning away. "And when we face cruelty," she said, her voice softening, "our instinct is to shout, but sometimes silence is stronger. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one changing it forever." When she finished, the applause didn't stop. It rolled on, a standing ovation that brought her to tears. Not for herself, but because somewhere in that audience she saw a few people crying too. She recognized the faces. A woman from Kenya whose autistic daughter had been denied school admission. A father from Italy who had quit his job to advocate for accessible travel. They were all part of the same current now, carried by compassion, not conflict. Afterward, as she left the stage, her phone buzzed with messages from across the world. Airline executives, parents, activists. One text stood out. "You turned a moment of hate into a movement of healing. The sky feels safer because of you." That night, back in her hotel suite overlooking Lake Geneva, Elena opened her laptop to a video call. 3 sleepy faces appeared. Malik, Micah, and Miles, huddled under blankets back home. "Mom, we watched you online," Malik said. "You didn't even look nervous," Elena smiled. "That's because I had the best audience waiting for me at home," Miles yawned. "Are you famous now?" "Maybe a little," she teased. "But fame doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with it." "Then what are you going to do next?" Micah asked, half asleep. Elena hesitated, then said, "We're going to build something together. A foundation. Not for me, not even for Skykind, but for every family that's been told they don't belong." She watched their eyes widen. "We'll call it Project Kind Flight. It'll make sure no kid ever feels unsafe when they travel, ever again." They cheered quietly, and in that simple, unfiltered joy, she felt the weight of every battle she'd fought lift just a little higher. When the call ended, she walked to the balcony. The lake shimmered under moonlight, calm and infinite. She took a long breath of the crisp air, feeling it fill her chest. Clean, real, alive. In the distance, a plane cut across the night sky, its red light blinking steady. Elena whispered to herself, "Keep flying, kind." And she knew. The words were no longer just a motto or a company slogan. They were a movement, a vow, a legacy written not in headlines, but in the hearts of those who finally felt seen. A year later, the airport looked different. Not in structure, the gates, terminals, and departure boards were the same, but in spirit. There was a softness now, a quiet awareness running through its veins. Signs displayed gentle reminders in soft blue letters. Patience is power. Every passenger matters. Fly kind. Families with special needs children moved confidently through security lanes marked inclusive access. Flight attendants knelt to greet kids eye to eye instead of towering over them. And at the Umai, center of it all, near the main terminal of Skykind's flagship hub, stood a bronze sculpture unveiled that morning. 3 children holding paper planes, their mother behind them with one hand resting protectively on their shoulders. At the base, a small inscription read, "To every child who was told they were too much, you were always enough." Elena stood quietly in front of the sculpture, sunglasses hiding the emotion pooling in her eyes. The dedication ceremony was over, the crowd gone, but she lingered, needing a few minutes alone with what it all meant. Lila approached softly behind her. "You did it," she said. Elena shook her head. "They did. I just made sure the world didn't look away this time." A light breeze carried the sound of planes taking off. Each rumble felt like a heartbeat. Project Kindflight had become global within months. Airlines across 50 countries had adopted its training modules. Schools began using SkyKind's inclusion curriculum. Airports redesigned sensory-friendly lounges. The movement was no longer about one mother's pain. It was about every traveler's right to feel safe in the sky. Elena's sons had grown taller. Malik now talked about becoming an engineer. Micah wanted to be a pilot. Miles had started drawing plane blueprints in notebooks. Each time they spoke about the future, Elena felt something inside her repair, like scar tissue turning to strength. "Mum," Malik had said last night, "are we still famous?" She'd smiled. "No, honey. We're something better. We're normal again." Now, standing before the statue, she finally understood the truth of that. The world didn't need her name trending anymore. It needed the kindness to keep moving without her voice pushing it. As she turned to leave, a small boy and his mother stopped nearby. The boy, no older than 8, stared at the sculpture with wide eyes. "Mum," he whispered. "That's her, right? The lady who made planes safe?" The woman smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. That's her." Eleanor froze, heart swelling. The boy looked at her then, recognition dawning, and smiled shyly. "Thank you," he said. She crouched down to meet his gaze. "You're welcome, Captain." He grinned at the title, clutching his toy airplane like it was real. As he ran off toward his gate, Elena straightened slowly, watching him disappear into the crowd. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was watching the world move on without her. She felt part of it again. Lila handed her an envelope. "You'll want to see this before we head back." Inside was an invitation. United Nations Conference on Human Dignity. Keynote speaker, Elena Brooks. She smiled faintly, folding it neatly. "The work never really ends, does it?" Lila chuckled. "Not for people who change the sky." As they walked toward the terminal, an overhead announcement echoed. "SkyKind Flight 7 to London now boarding." Elena stopped, glancing out the massive window as the aircraft glided along the runway. The sunlight caught its metallic skin, turning it gold. For a fleeting moment, she saw her reflection beside it. Strong, calm, whole. She whispered to herself, "Safe travels, everyone." Then she turned, shoulders relaxed, steps light. The journey had begun with a slap, a cry, and a storm. It ended here, not with noise, but with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't demand attention, but leaves a mark so deep, it changes how the world breathes. Above, a SkyKind jet rose through scattered clouds, its engines fading into the distance. And in that sound, steady, graceful, infinite, lived everything Eleanor Brooks had ever fought for.